Okay, so just a small introduction of Google Cloud or cloud in general. So the traditional computing resources that you can get for your server was like you just have to buy a server, put it somewhere, connect it, or like put it in some data center and connect it to everybody. So you all manage the server and you're responsible for the server, and somebody just provides you some connectivity. But it's kind of costly. So there were like several workarounds to reduce costs. I don't know whether you're using those or not. So there was a so-called shared web hosting where you can just buy a space on the server, put some files, and they can render it as part of the web server. And I think at some places you can just could have rented the server, but you're getting access to the whole server. Or in some places you can get some virtual machine, but again, you were getting the whole thing. So what Amazon started a long time ago is to kind of charge you not per machine per month per year, but rather you get in some resource like CPU, storage, and some other resources, and you've been charged per hour, or per minute. I forgot the exact granularity. And you can get as much resources that you need to deploy your application, whether it's a web application on one server, or you want to distribute in different places. So you get like instant CPU and networking resources in different places, and instantiate multiple web servers, and you manage the multiple machines. That's pretty cool if you have a web application or some other application that has different loads during different times. So if during peak hours, you can pay a little bit more to instantiate multiple web servers, and when nobody is using your server, then there's nothing to do. So I started talking about Amazon. So Amazon was the first one. I think it's called AWS. So Amazon Cloud Services. So you can try, and there are different web services that you can, cloud services that you can sign up. And today, effectively everybody is providing such cloud-based service to where you can buy computing resource or not buy, but rent the resource per minute, per hour, per whatever, per month. So Amazon is one, Microsoft is the other one. I forgot the name of Azure, anyway, whatever the weird name. Google is somehow behind all of those two. But besides the American ones, there's also Alibaba Cloud that if you want to have presence in different countries. And I think in some European services, but I'm not 100% sure. So I was saying there was a bunch of providers. They have different resources, and then what they differ from is price points, like how much they charge for different cycles, and different management interfaces, different presence in different places, like in whatever data centers. And I guess that's it. So what you can, for the class we're going to be using Google Cloud because there's this coupon thingy exists, so we don't need to pay any money. But in reality, in your work, you can try Amazon. I think you just have more data centers around the world that you can rent space in different places and with many different applications. Pricing. Okay, pricing in these places is a bit a mess. So even though it's cheap, like you can rent an hour of CPU cycles, you can instantiate VM, somehow it's not that trivial to actually calculate how much exactly you will be charged. Because you will be charged, what a simple process is a CPU cycle. So you can just literally calculate based on how many CPU cycles and the price point. But there are different price points if you use the CPU for a month or just using it for an hour. There will be difference depending on which data center you're using. It's a different price depending. If you have some corporate discounts, you have a different price. But that's that is the simplest part. And then there's you can add the storage price because they will kind of Amazon, Google will bill you for all amount of storage you're actually using, for all networking, like how many bytes or how many gigabytes were transferred between Americas, between like different regions. So you're gonna get like some charges, and especially in your account that you will be using, you will see some of the kind of billing billings that is happening. For the Amazon, I don't even know how to find the specific price. Okay, maybe that would be part of the homework to figure out how much Amazon difference between Amazon prices and Azure prices, Alibaba prices, and Google Cloud. So at least some simple thing. All these prices published, so you can just find them. It's just not obvious to find those places. Okay, so getting to the Google Cloud, I think, as I said, all interfaces would be quite different, but you do it in a web interface. Like the starting point is a web interface where you just go to the AWS or Google Cloud. So this one is consolecloudgoogle.com. That would be the starting point. We just Google Cloud if you haven't started yet. And then you will be presented with a bunch of opportunities to do various stuff. So the first step, if you haven't activated your coupon, would be to create so-called project, or like there will be some default so-called project created. And project is nothing more than just a grouping of things that you've been creating and like associated billing with this group of resources that you will be renting or not renting. So there is a bunch, tons of different things that Google platform is actually offering you kind of for different price. So the most basic thing is I was looking at right now, so-called the compute engine. And the compute engine is simply some CPU, some virtual machines that you can instantiate. Just let's go here, and then what you can instantiate. So I'll just kind of highlight what you can instantiate. So you can pick the different region. So you can instantiate this VM in kind of tons of different regions in the United States and outside the United States. And within the region, there is like some different data centers in that region. There are different types of CPUs you can request, and all of them will kind of have different price points. So there is a micro that is not really whole CPU, but there are like some kind of virtual CPU shared among other people. Or you can actually select the 96 CPUs, like if you really have something like heavy to process, and different amounts of RAM. So as you can see, the ultra machine that you can get is 160 CPUs with 3.8 terabytes of RAM. Like this is like ridiculous processing. I think $50 will not be enough for like an hour of this. So make sure you know what you're doing. So what else we have here? So the first step is effectively to select what kind of hardware resources that you would like to rent, and then you simply specify what kind of a base image you want to use for that virtual machine. So there's a bunch of images that Google provided, like the Debian, Linux, some, I don't exactly know how this Microsoft thing's working. I actually only use among these guys, I only use Ubuntu servers. But you just select whatever you want. You can select the disk space that you would like to use, some initial size of this disk. Again, be mindful of the amounts. I think you will be charged with the actual used amounts, not like if you ask for 10 gigabytes, you will be charged for 10 gigabytes. The price is reasonable, so don't panic about anything, but you have to be mindful of the amounts of the data you're using. And you will create that virtual machine. There's a few small things. So I already have kind of two virtual machines running here, so I'm not going to create anything new. So one thing that you will notice maybe there are two different IP addresses for each instance. And one thing that all these cloud providers are doing, they're not giving you directly this public IP address. So kind of if you log into that or SSH to that machine, you will see only so-called internal IP address from the internal network. And in this case, it would be 10.142.02 or the other address. And you will get the so-called external IP address, but it will be kind of indirectly associated, and there will be some NAT service on the Google side that mapping this real IP address wherever it needed to be mapped to your internal IP address. So if you go outside, everything will be properly mapped, and if you go inside, it will be also properly mapped. So unlike the NAT that you see that we talked last time, where we had port numbers, remembering of this NAT table. So this NAT is actually much simpler. It's just based on the IP address. So it's that real IP address is mapped to that unreal IP address and back. So there's no real routing. This NAT table exists anywhere, but rather just mapping of these two addresses. And whenever a packet goes out, addresses switch, and packet goes in, addresses switch. Okay, so that's the basic stuff, and there's a lot of other complexities associated. So you can create different logical networks. So there is a default network that's being created, this Unreal network. But if I wanted, I could have these two instances connected to the same network, like internal network. So when they talk to each other, they would go over some internal paths without ever going outside Google Cloud. What you can have, you can customize. There are so many different options. Instance groups. So I guess I did not use this one yet, and most likely this is when you're managing a large group of instances, and you need to common operations to all of them, instead of sending commands to individual ones. Templates, it's not that interesting right now, but you can create templates of what you're instantiating and save it as a template, so you can quickly instantiate what you need with the image, not just the base image that exists already in Google, but something you have customized. Again, disks is just a disk. Snapshots, it's a pretty cool feature. It's acting as you can set it up to act as a backup, where you can snapshot any disk at any point of time, and it will save it in a space-efficient manner, so you can always use the amount of data that is differential from the previous state that was snapshot. It's incremental snapshots of whatever disks you would like to snapshot. Images is just images of whatever VMs that they already exist there, or you can not upload, but create the new ones. TPUs, I have not seen this before, but something about AI processing. Discounts, okay, that's a lot of different other stuff, and this is just inside this computing engine. And for the purposes of this class, we'll probably just use this computing engine part of the Google Cloud. But you can also see there's a bunch of other things that exist, and I hope we'll be able to see. Okay, so there is a so-called app engine. There's Kubernetes engine, cloud functions, big table, data store, file store. Anyhow, there's a long list of different things that you can run. But to give you a few words about this app engine. So app engine is nothing more than renting a VM plus renting a semi-managed pre-installed applications on pre-configured application. So you will be charged for the all resources that VM is using, plus the additional fees associated with whatever service. Kubernetes it's Kubernetes. You can Google what, I mean, it's some other things. Cloud functions, I did not enable, but it's another kind of cool feature where you can request processing of something without actually creating VM and kind of instantiating the application, but rather kind of request some process in cloud without figuring out what kind of creating those VMs yourself and managing all those queries yourself. But the Bigtable is just some to store a lot of data using various APIs. You can have a data store. I mean, that would kind of equivalent of you renting a bunch of VMs, creating or installing some kind of a SQL database on those VMs and managing yourselves, versus you can kind of ask for the service, and then Google Cloud internals will manage all this data set, like instead of all this data set for you. I believe there's different prices for those, but I have not used them, so I cannot give you too much details on that. File store, again, is just an additional API to store file storage, or SQL, spanner, memory store, file store. There are also other things, like in Google, there's API for mailing stuff. So if you want to do a lot of spam for some particular reason, you can effectively buy a service that you will pay either for each individual email that you're sending or like per number of requests. So you kind of buy it in bulk, and then you can use some cloud API to send different emails. But we'll get to emails later. Okay, so among all things that you may need in near future would be this VPC network, and this is the place where you could configure different networks, and this could play in our project later. So if we need to create some kind of internal network and configure hosts that associate to join that specific network, you may need to create something new. I mean, you can just create any specific network that you like. You can select any address range that you would prefer, and kind of some other things. The region would be, I mean, it's some kind of VPN network that will connect all your devices and they can communicate with each other. Firewall rules, it's also, and probably you will not need this one, but if you need to realize some service in Google Cloud, it's not just enough to instantiate that VM, you also need to open some ports so you can actually do some meaningful stuff. There are a few default rules that exist, like HTTPS server, so you can create your web server using your VMs. But you can also create your own rules, simply defining like what kind of port you want to open, and then apply that specific firewall rule to VM that you're creating. Routes, the rest is not that interesting. Are we enthusiastic about Google Cloud? Are you ready to create 2 VMs with 160 CPUs?
Who's paying for it?
No? Okay, I'm not ready.
So expensive.
Yeah.
Who's paying for it?
We need to figure out what exactly the pricing. Like, let's say Google Cloud pricing.
There's a chart.
You will get 300.
There's a monthly and hourly pricing.
Yeah, you will get
per CPUs.
300 cadets. Use that amount of CPUs it requires.
Per second?
Per month.
Prices.
If you go compute engine,
Okay.
scroll down, it's
Okay, so we're getting closer. Okay, and this is not the one. So where we have. Oh, this is. Okay, so.
hourly. That's not bad.
Month. Okay, so if you instantiate that thing, for a month, it will be down like 12 grand, like 19 grand. If you do, I don't know, I'm not sure it would be allowed if you don't add a credit card. I mean, I hope Google's smart enough not to charge you more. I wouldn't bet on that. Like, if you ever added some credit card to your account, then you should be careful. But in any case, you technically with $50 you can run it for 2 hours and do something magical with that machine. But kind of on the lower side, you can. So the price is actually like 5 cents per hour. Well, per month it would be $24. It's actually not the lowest price. Sorry. So that would be for one real CPU and like 4 gigs of memory. One of the instances I'm running is this micro CPU, and I'm trying to figure out. Oh, so the micro CPU, kind of the smallest possible thing, you can get away with just like paying under 1 cent per hour, which is like $4 a month. So this one, don't really look at this price. So there's a concept in the Google Cloud, the preemptible, which means your instance, whatever VM you're creating, will not live more than 24 hours, and Google can kill it anytime. So it's kind of useful for kind of applications, or like if you want to create additional capacity for the web server, but you don't really care if some instance is killed, because you have 300 other web servers running that can serve this request. But if you just creating VM to play with that VM, you will be surprised if you're getting killed for no particular reason right away. So for you, it's just this price. And actually, a good part of Google Cloud, it gives one such micro instance effectively for free forever. So you kind of even after this class, you can. I'm not sure whether credit card is required or not required, but you can have one of these for free forever. At least I'm having it.
It's required.
Credit card required?
Yes.
So I'm guessing it's required because they still charge you for traffic. So even they don't charge you for CPU and storage, for a put of 10 gigs of storage, they will charge you for the amount of traffic somebody accessing your VM or you accessing or uploading data. So that's my guess.
They say that they want to make sure that this is not a robot, and also they give $300 as a credit.
But that's only for a year. Like my $300 expired like a year ago, unfortunately. And I didn't want to create a new Google account to get it for free. Okay, what else? So, before you do the homework, I just can tell you, Google Cloud price is a bit smaller, compared to AWS and Azure, and only because Google Cloud was appeared after all two already existed, and AWS everybody knows about, so they kind of can charge a little bit more. Okay, you can explore all these prices and see. So what else about Google Cloud? To create engine. Any other question? Okay, view instances. Oh, okay. How to connect to the instance? So you will have a few options actually to connect to that specific instance. Of course, you can do in the web browser. So there is this SSH button that you can click, and it will present you kind of semi-terminal interface, and not semi, but terminal interface that you can add SSH and do SSH in a browser. If you know how, like if you can figure out how to. So you can use your own, like if you're on Linux machine, you can, or if you're on Linux machine, there is like a simplification of Linux on Mac. You can install so-called Google Cloud Suite, G Cloud. It's just like a set of command line tools that allows, that allows you to do everything you can do in web interface, but in command line. And as part of that operation, you can kind of start SSH from the command line directly if you want to. Or you can play with the VM, and specifically there is a place somewhere about authorization. Let me find it. So there is a kind of, when you're creating a VM, you can specify what kind of what public keys can log into that virtual machine. And this is like a private key that is similar to the, I mean, either similar or exactly the same that you have used to set up Git, to connect to GitHub. So you can just put this key here, and then you effectively be able to like SSH with your username. I'm not 100% sure which username, and username and like a public IP address of that VM. There's a third option, which kind of similar to the first one, is to launch so-called Cloud Shell. And this is a kind of semi-random thing that Google invented. It's kind of spanning a virtual machine for the purpose of management. And in that virtual machine, that they don't charge you, but it doesn't live too long and you cannot do too much. You can issue all these Google Cloud commands. So this G-Cloud already exists, and I think you already authenticated because you already logged in. And you can explore different things like a G-Cloud compute SSH, and you just do some random stuff. So you can, with the Google Cloud, you can do some configuration. And with the G-Cloud command line, you can do a lot of things to see what kind of instances you created. You can create instances, you can log into instances, and do like everything that you really want to do with this Google Cloud. Briefly mentioned, so there's two parts of this so-called port forwarding. And in the Google Cloud specifically, it's done using firewall rules. So first one, you need to create the firewall rule, the corresponding, and it's hidden in VPC network firewall rules. In that firewall rule, so the one I just created was this allowed DNS. And what you need to do is to just give some name, give a so-called tag for the rule. I'll give you in a second. Then define from which IP addresses it can go. So you can just say 00000, and you can specify any other kind of subnet that you would want to restrict this rule to be applied to. And then you just say what kind of ports you want to do, to use either specific ones or all ports. If you want to do beyond TCP UDP protocol, you specify which one you want. And what I have, just to see if I edit, so that I gave a name, I didn't change any of these things. I added DNS server as a tag, 00, and just added these ports as wanted. So this was just a firewall rule. So now there's a tag called DNS server that's kind of associated with this specific rule. Like a tag is associated with some other things, I think with routes and networks, but just bear with me for a second. So then either when I'm creating this VM instance or when I'm editing, I simply added this kind of tag that it's a DNS server, and Google was smart enough to kind of connect that there's a tag, there's a firewall rule associated with the tag, and there's a VM instance that also has this tag, so it matched them together. And now this server is allowed kind of incoming connections for destination port 53, which is DNS port. And there are two defaults, as I said, HTTP and HTTPS rules that kind of by default added to the instance.